Welcome back to Free Founders, where we share actionable lessons from the world's best solopreneurs and small business owners. This is for aspiring entrepreneurs who want proven strategies to go from zero to first sale and onwards to scale and enjoy the freedom that comes along with it. My guest today is Emily Claire Hughes. Emily started out as a singer off Broadway in New York, then moved to Germany as a cruise ship singer. We'll definitely hear about that. Went all in on copywriting after that, and now runs Emily Claire & Co., where she helps female-focused companies communicate their superpowers through better copy and influencer marketing. Emily thinks everyone interested in starting a business must start a newsletter. So in this episode, expect to learn, perhaps not surprisingly, why it's essential to build your own newsletter before you even think about starting a business. Secondly, how to build a wildly profitable newsletter and business off the back of it. And thirdly, we'll talk about the power of an unconventional value proposition for really helping business get going and build momentum. Let's jump in and welcome Emily.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. For personal curiosity, I want to start talking about your backstory. So you start in local theatre, go to the big bright lights of New York. I imagine that's a tough world. What did you learn that maybe set you up for entrepreneurship later on?
Like looking back now, wow. I mean, it's a great question. The two skill sets are wildly different, absolutely wildly different. Like my university degree is in musical theater. So I think it's just so funny to think about so many people who went to university classes and sat there and studied, business and marketing and things like that all day. Whereas, I was tap dancing or I was doing film television, or things like that. It was just a wild time, but it was amazing. And I actually have no regrets. I have zero regrets for what I studied. But I think now if I look back, some of the things that are probably the biggest thing that I think prepared me for entrepreneurship is my relationship with rejection. And I know that might sound bad, but as a performer, as an actress, like my job was to go to so many auditions every single day, right? And the odds of getting a job from those auditions are incredibly small. That's why like being a performer is literally a numbers game. You go to probably 85 auditions and get one job, right? And so then it wasn't that hard for me to go into becoming an entrepreneur. And, you have people rejecting you all the time, in either directly or indirectly, right? They want to follow you on Instagram or they don't. They want to sign up for your newsletter or they don't. You have a call with someone who maybe wants to work with you and then they decide they don't. And I think for me, it's not like I wasn't sad when that happened, right? But I think I've become really good at just kind of compartmentalizing that and going, okay, I'm going to take these 5 minutes to be upset about that, but it's time to move on because there are other opportunities out there in the world. So honestly, truly, I think this relationship with rejection, when I first started my business, I wasn't scared of the failure part of it, right? Because I knew that like, it's just a numbers game. I just have to keep going and I have to reach more people and I have to talk to more potential clients and eventually the odds will turn in my favor. And I've seen so many people, especially in the beginning, I think, and I'm sure so many people that you've talked to as well have noticed this, that when you do become a solopreneur, it's such a lonely existence anyways, that I think then the more the failure or fear factor starts to really affect you, the easier it is to give up. And I think for me, that was just never an option because I just know rejection is a part of life.
Yeah, really interesting. And I suppose there's another key lesson there. I think you're absolutely right. A lot of people give up way too early on their business, but also just, I suppose, understanding that. I imagine when you go to a role, they're looking for a specific type of person for some roles. And sometimes you could be like the best actress in the world, but it's not going to perform, not going to fit that specific profile. I think that's also true of business where we go, they rejected us because they don't like us. And it's like, no, it's nothing about you. It's just that your offer is not quite right for this specific type of person, but it's right for these other 1,000 people over here. And I think just understanding that, again, it's not personal and it's just about finding the right audience is like, director in this case.
And I think that's something
is what's important.
I think that's also something that you hit an interesting point as well. This is a big part of why I wanted to start my own business. When I was a performer, I felt so like at the whims of other people. My success felt so dependent on other people. I was not in charge of my own success at all. And this drove me crazy because I've always been a hard worker. I've always had a really hard work ethic. I knew I was talented, right? But the problem is when you're a performer, so is everybody else. And I think exactly like what you said. It's, you go into a room and you were either exactly what they wanted or you just weren't. And I became so frustrated because I had ticked all the right boxes. I had done all the right things. I had agents, I had jobs, I had a resume with good stuff on it. And I just felt like I couldn't break through. I couldn't get that success that I knew that I deserved in life, not just as a performer. And so then I think for me, it became so much more attractive to start my own business, which I think for some people it's scary, right? If you come from full-time employment all the time, you're used to this very stable existence. I never had that. So I didn't really have anything to lose by starting my own business, if that makes sense. And so for me, a big, big, big driver of starting my own business was the fact that I could be in charge of my own success. Yes, I knew that it might not be, an overnight sensation and that I would have to work really hard to get clients, but I knew that I could do it. And that to me was like the most exciting thing about starting my business.
Yeah, that sense of control, I think, over one's destiny.
I'm basically a control freak. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think everybody, I think it's a very natural human. Maybe it's because I'm an entrepreneur as well, but it feels very natural that you want to control your outcome. I think it's very similar actually to many people in full-time employment go, okay, I want to do freelancing because that equals freedom. And actually, unless you've got like a personal brand, you're putting content out, you're really proactive, you're basically at the whim of, you do a 3-month contract and then sort of fingers crossed the recruiter is going to find you a role, or fingers crossed the company is going to extend the contract. And in a way, it's even worse than being employed, I think, in that kind of context, because at least employment, at least in Europe, you've got some level of security
Exactly
around it. Yeah, interesting. So you move on to Hamburg, Germany, and become a cruise ship singer.
Correct.
Tell us about that. Again, what did you learn during that experience?
Oh gosh.
Apart from all of the German party Schlager songs.
You know about Schlager?
Yeah.
How?
My cousin's from Germany, so we used to go a lot. So
oh my
always
gosh.
like small local Oktoberfests in the summer.
I compare Schlager to like, I think Schlager is like the German version of like country music, kind of. It's just like, it's just this weird niche style of music that, and I like country music. So no shade there. Yeah. Sorry, to go back to your question. Working on a cruise ship, living and working on a cruise ship, singing on a cruise ship, truthfully, honestly, it is an experience that I will remember for the rest of my life. I think I was 25 when I started, and what a cool experience to have in your 20s. Do I think it's something that can exist long term or be sustainable? No, of course not. That's why I stopped. It's a very strange life. Being so, again, going back to this idea of control, having absolutely no control over your own life. You are always, dictated by the ship's clock, what time you eat, what time you wake up, what time is rehearsal. There's rough sea today. You would have to be prepared at a moment's notice to get a call from your stage manager and have to like completely come up with a new show for the evening because the dancers couldn't dance because the stage is moving too much because we're in rough sea off the coast of Iceland. Crazy things like that would just happen every single day. And I think it was an awesome test of adaptability, right? Just being up for things, changing things at a moment's notice. But it was also an incredible experience. I mean, in two different ways, right? Personal life, it's amazing to wake up in a new country every day. I've always been a person who loves to travel. And for me, especially as an American, we were going to countries that were just never even on my radar of countries to travel to. When we first went to Helsinki in Finland, I remember being like, well, this is cool. Why have I never heard of Finland? We were in the fjords of Norway. I became obsessed. Like Norway to this day is one of my favorite countries just because the nature is stunning, right? And these are places where, when you grow up in America, you know of them, but like you don't see ads to like go on a trip to Finland. It's just not really a thing. So I had so much exposure to incredible countries, incredible people and scenery and things like that. And on the professional front as well, if you are a singer, cruise ship singing jobs can actually be really awesome. You're singing on incredible stages. Depending on which cruise line you work for, entertainment is a really big marketing tactic that they use, right? They're like, oh, we have world-class entertainment and things like that. So truthfully, the stage that I sang on those cruise ships was much better than some of the stages I sang on in New York. Like we had hydraulics going up and down, crazy effects, like an auditorium where thousands of people could sit. It was really next level. And I think for me, then it was I mean, amazing. So I get to go travel during the day and then come back and do shows for thousands of really excited German people at night. Like, cool. It was great.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. I mean, is there any sort of repetition of shows? I also think, is it the same crowd? But I suppose those ships are like cities. But
It is. It is actually, to be honest, most times it's the same people that come to the shows. And that's actually a great question. And good for you for even thinking to ask that. No, it's normally when you like, depends on how long the cruise is. And by cruise, I mean like how long is like the itinerary that those people have signed up for, right? So like your typical cruise ship itinerary would be people get on board on Sunday and or Saturday or Sunday, depending on what day you leave. And then you would leave and come back on that following Saturday or Sunday, right? So like it's like a week long. For week long cruises, what we learned when we first came to Hamburg and we're doing all of our rehearsals, we would learn a different show for every single night of the week. So every single night of the week, those people would be getting a different show. So we would learn like 6 or 7 different shows, which is amazing, but it's also a lot of information to put in your head. Like as a performer, it is actually quite an intense job. Fast forward to the next contract I did, and we were doing 17-day cruises then. So then, I mean, you can't learn 17 shows. To be honest, I think there's no way that one person can keep 17 different shows in their mind. But I think we did have between 9 and 10 shows at that point. So we were doing 9 and 10 different shows. If we were lucky, every now and then we would get a night off. And then if we didn't have a night off, then we would be doing like, we could come up with like our own solo show that we wanted to do, or we could put together a night with the band on the ship or something like that. The point here was that I think especially from the cruise director's standpoint, they just always wanted it to feel like there was music and energy happening somewhere on the ship every night. Because at the end of the day, almost every cruise ship, everybody gets back on board before the end of the night, right? So they go out and see everything in the country during the day, and then they get back on board for their dinner and a show, right? So the idea here is there always needs to be a show for people. So we would never repeat things for like the same crowd. I think that would have been a bit boring, but a lot of times it was the same people, because I think a lot of people booked cruises, yes, to go see the places for sure. Like that's probably the number one selling point, but also just because there's so much entertainment for them. So I think most times, I would say the majority of the people on the ship are very active participants in the entertainment program, because that's part of why they booked the cruise.
Yeah, interesting. Do you think that, and obviously, moving from the US, although New York's not exactly small world or like small minded, like midtown country girl kind of stuff, but what did you find that sort of taught you anything, or, think about this entrepreneurial journey you eventually start, any sort of key lessons there?
Ooh, that I learned on the ship? I would say,
Well, just from the
yeah.
whole experience, right? Because obviously, you're based in Hamburg suddenly, not in New York.
Oh, I mean, for me, yeah. I mean, that couple of years where I was kind of figuring out where I wanted to live, what was I doing, what did I identify with, things like that. I definitely learned so much. I mean, I think for me, a thing that I definitely learned was, I mean, this literally now directly translates into what I do every single day, is the power of good communication. Because when you are working on a ship, you are working with people who speak so many different languages, so many different cultures, so many different backgrounds. And it's really easy to be misunderstood. It's really easy to accidentally offend people, things like that. So I think for me, it was always the power of really good communication. Also, the power of understanding, like, I think as a performer, and I would never say like I've never been a person with like a diva mentality. I'm really happy to be a part of an ensemble, but you just start to realize that there are factors at play that are bigger than you, right? Like weather or natural disasters or things like that. And I think sometimes, to be honest, it was a really nice reminder of, it's hard because when you are a singer and people literally treat you like stars, we were called the Aida stars. It's so funny. And they would have like our pictures up and people would like, want to like autographs signed by us. And like, we were always in really beautiful hair and makeup. So we would look like these kind of like superstars, if that makes sense. And it was nice every now and then to kind of have that reminder of, no, actually there's bad sea today. So can you just come up with a show out of nowhere? Right. And just that lesson in adaptability, I think was really great. Also for me, that whole experience was an amazing eye opener in terms of me realizing that like, I do want to work with international clients. I do want to be more than just this girl who lives in the US. Like at that point, like my eyes were totally open to the fact that I definitely wanted to have a footprint in Europe. I wanted to work with more European companies. I would figure out later on. So I would say there's like an endless amount of lessons. And also I think maybe the biggest one that's probably just like the most generic, but still true to this day, is just this kind of endless curiosity, right? On a cruise ship, especially with the ensemble, there would always be some people that would just go to the same coffee shop to use the Wi-Fi and like post things on Instagram, right? And for me, it was like, where can I go hiking today in Norway? You know, who like, oh, what's this thing I saw online? Like, I want to go to that place. Could I rent a car today in the Bahamas? Why not? Why don't I rent a car and see what I can go explore? And I think that, to be honest, like has like translated tenfold into having a business where I help other people communicate what they do, right? So it's just this endless curiosity of like, I'm never afraid to ask people questions. I'm never afraid to, just really tap into what makes people tick. And I think that's something that is just naturally fostered when you're in an environment where you wake up in a new country every single day.
If you're enjoying this episode and want to get each shiny new episode straight to whatever platform you use to listen to your podcast, please subscribe using the subscribe button below. Yeah, I think that's why travel is always so powerful. I think that sort of curiosity and and that motivation as well to do more of it. I also see, I don't know if this is accurate, but when you're talking about it, I was thinking it makes a lot of sense because when I looked, looking through your website and sort of your email copy and you have a very good knack of like very clearly understanding who you're speaking. So it's like good communication, but also there is a sense of sort of making this person feel special, right? You're appealing to female founders, and it seems like it's a motivational journey rather than, oh, here are all the problems you face and I'm going to help it. But there's a sort of that comes through, and for me that actually reminds me of that whole cruise ship experience, right? Making us feel really special, like going to Disney, right? You have this sort of like special moments and these things that are quite intangible, but ultimately make the product what it is. So that's quite interesting parallels, and if that comes from the performance world or from your copywriting.
I'm so happy you say that. That actually makes me really happy. One of the things I would say I love most, and I mean, don't get me wrong, it was definitely a journey, right? Like I didn't immediately leave the cruise ship and start my own business. I definitely had to gain some experience and kind of overcome my own imposter syndrome. And I had a few different full-time jobs that helped kind of get me to where I am today. But I think for me, the thing that I absolutely love most now about having my own business and being in a position where people do trust me, to help them come up with their own strategy for communications and convey their words for them and things like that is I do a lot of one-on-one calls with some of my clients. And I would say 10 times out of 10, like I always check in with people at the end of the call. How do you feel? And what I love is at the end of the call, everybody always goes, I feel awesome. I feel so much better. I feel like I have a plan and this and that. And Emily, I always leave these calls just feeling awesome. And I'm not making this up. Like if they told me they felt pretty shit, I would tell you.
No, I've got the recommendation to reach out to you from a very happy Alice Egan.
Yes, I love working with Alice. She's the best. And to me, it's like, that is what I want people to know about working with me. You know what I mean? So from day one, it's like, yes, we've all read the marketing books and tactics. And yes, you can fearmonger people into wanting to work with you, but that is so not what I'm going for, right? If people are trying to find a copywriter, it is very clear they have a problem. They don't know how to use the right words to get people interested in what they're doing, right? So for me, it's like the one thing that I have really become so intentional about with my own business is, as an entrepreneur, I have tested multiple other people's services. You know what I mean? Like if I think anything can bring me value, I will test it. Like I love a good business expense. And so many times I found that it's these really empty digital offers that like provide there's no feeling attached to them, if that makes sense. And something that I am very, very intentional about is, if you're going to work with me, you're going to feel something and you're going to know that I'm supporting you. I'm directly cheerleading you on this journey. And that also goes to, something I'm sure we'll talk about as well in a few minutes as well, is that is why I've been so intentional as well about choosing to work with female founders, because I know firsthand, having started a business myself as a woman, and a woman who thought she was thoroughly unqualified to do anything besides, sing, act, and dance, is confidence is such an issue. So many people, especially women, because it's just been statistically proven time and time again, we struggle with the confidence to start a business, right? And so it's like, I want people to read through that copy on my website and go, I can do this. If I work with this girl, even better, right? But it's, I don't need you to work with me in order to succeed. I just need you to know that you can succeed and that you deserve to succeed and you have everything within you to go and succeed. And this is kind of that feeling that I always want people to have, because it's also inspired from my own journey, right? I mean, like, there's every reason why I should not have succeeded as an entrepreneur. I should still be singing on cruise ships, but I didn't want to do that.
I want to come back to this story because I think it's a reason why I want to really deep dive into your business shortly, because I think it's very interesting as a case study for people. But I think it's easy for people to go, look at where somebody is now. It's like, okay, Emily, you come across, very professional. You've got this business going, and they sort of assume that was all planned out. And I think, well, I imagine when you were cruising around Northern Europe, doing shows every night, I imagine you didn't go, okay, so next I'm going to be a travel blogger, and then get a copywriting job, and then I'm going to work with influencers, and then I'm going to start my own copywriting influencer marketing business. Like, we'll work it out as we go. But along that journey, so first question, what did trigger you to leave? Because it's not just the cruise ship, it's leaving that whole world behind, right?
Yeah.
The dreams and hard work of performing on Broadway. Firstly, what made you leave that behind? And secondly, what were the key lessons from entering that whole new world of copywriting and then eventually starting your own business?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack, but I'll keep it as brief as I can. Kind of just like, I mean, highlights, I would say. I was on my third cruise contract, seeing a new part of the world, was really excited about it. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll do one more, because there was one cruise that I really wanted. They were doing a world cruise. And I thought, how cool would it be if I could, also because it's like any job, the more that you work with them, the more they get to know you, the more they like you, they start to realize Emily's very nice. She's a hard worker. Cool. Maybe we'll give her the contracts that she asks for. So I was thinking, okay, maybe I'll do one more contract. I would love to get that world cruise. But then the wheels in my head were already turning. I knew I didn't want to go back to New York, right? I knew I wanted to still find a way to live in Europe. But to be honest, and I'm sure like maybe some people listening to this can relate, if they've tried to just move to another country, it's not so easy. You can't just rock up in Europe and say, hey, can I stay? Right? I was trying to figure
singing,
out.
But
yeah, like, can I sing a song for you? Will you give me a visa? They don't really do that. So I was trying to figure out where I could live and what I could do. And also for me at that time, I knew a big change was coming because I didn't want to go back to New York. But to be honest, if you're going to perform anywhere, New York, in my opinion, was the place, right? So I wasn't really going to go to Europe and try and be a performer in Europe, because I kind of felt like I had already done that. And I had done that in New York, but I felt completely lost as to what that next step could be. So I did, I think, what many people 10 years ago did when they felt lost. I started a blog. And was like, cool, let me just kind of like speak this out to people. And I found that I really enjoyed writing. I really enjoyed sharing stories. And I had the added benefit of, at that point in time, my life was very interesting, right? Waking up in a new country every day, detailing itineraries for all these random places. Oh, what's it like to be, in St. Petersburg for a day, or things like that. Like, I had very interesting things to write about. So I started this blog, and then my wheels just started turning. And the more my wheels started turning, I started to think, okay, I really like this, and it seems to work. Like, I seem to be kind of good at this. Like, people respond, they leave comments. Oh, look, I can write for this other travel blog now. That seems cool. So I think the one thing I will say that I definitely had going for me from the beginning is somehow, whether or not I knew it, I kind of had this marketing / entrepreneurial mindset, right? I knew that I had created something. It was working. Cool. How could I leverage that to get something better, if that makes sense? So how can I use the blog that I have now? How can I start writing for a better travel blog so people take me more seriously? From there, oh, this is cool. I think I can go on free trips now. I started to see, like, I went on this incredible trip to Indonesia, like, for this travel blog I was writing for. But there was still this one key factor that was missing for me. And that was this, like, being in control of my own success and also work-life balance, which is something at that point I think I was really, really hungry for, because I had never had it. I had missed so many holidays, so many family functions. Like, I was just notorious among my sisters for just never being available, missing everything. And I did not enjoy being that person. Like, I wanted to be reliable. I wanted to be available. I wanted to be at family functions. I wanted to be in family photos. And so I started to just kind of think about what else I could do. Staring at the evidence in front of me, it was writing, right? I was like, I seem to enjoy writing. People seem to respond to it. So at that point, then I just busted my butt and would take any writing job I could find while I was simultaneously on the cruise ship. So I started piecing together a really makeshift portfolio. Like, we're talking like bare bones, but it was different clients with different logos, right? So like, almost, it wasn't as bad as, like, and nothing against Upwork, but I'm honestly, truly not the biggest fan. It was basically like me taking like writing gigs on Upwork or similar things, like very low budget LinkedIn writing jobs that people would need like a blog post article for or something like that. And so I cobbled together a portfolio, started reaching out to interview for copywriting jobs because I just decided that seemed like the next step of what I could do.
Full-time jobs.
Yeah, full-time jobs. Exactly. Because I think at this point I was trying to figure out basically I was also trying to gauge at this point, would anyone take me seriously or do I need to keep cruising until I get to that point? Like I was kind of trying to figure out like, where am I right now in the grand scheme of life? And yeah, so I remember very specifically, I had one job interview sitting at the port terminal at like some like Margaritaville in Cozumel, Mexico. Sorry. That one was an interesting experience. Then I took another job interview in the Netherlands. I was sitting at like this beachside cafe in the Netherlands. Everything was remote, thank God. And I will never forget my former boss, Romana, who I'm now still very close with to this day. And she actually helps me with my marketing now. She said, Emily, I just have to be honest with you. You are the most unqualified person that we've interviewed for this job. And I laughed and I said, I know. I will not pretend, that I am, the world's most experienced copywriter, but there's clearly a reason I'm here. You clearly liked, what I submitted to you. Like, please just give me a chance. And if you're willing to give me a chance, I promise I'll give you everything I have. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. Needless to say, it worked out. She hired me. They hired me for a full-time job. And that was the job that kind of kickstarted like everything that I am now. And I got so lucky with two women there who really believed in me. Like they were just sending me resource after resource after resource because they knew that there were gaps that I needed to fill. I was very open about, I will never forget my first day of training. I didn't even know how to use Google Docs. Like I knew nothing, right? So it was just like pulling up all these things. And, they were sending me Refolio, B School, which is an amazing resource for anyone who wants to get better as a copywriter. And I took all of it, you know what I mean? Or they would send me courses or references or people I should follow. And I did all of it because I was so hungry to make up for what to me was this glaring lack of experience. But in reality, kind of going back to, I think one of the pieces of the question that you had just asked is for me, it was definitely overcoming imposter syndrome. No questions asked, because I think I just felt like, when are they all going to find out? Like, when are they all going to find out that like, I really didn't study this? Like, they're like, I really have no idea what I'm doing. You know what I mean? I had that feeling a lot. And it wasn't until maybe about 6 months in at least, where then I just noticed that like, they kept giving me new responsibilities and I kept getting asked to do cooler things and better things. And it slowly over time became, I think I'm actually good at this. Like, I think people trust me. I think they know that I won't let them down. I have really awesome ideas because I have this crazy creative brain, and everything else I can Google or I can ask questions. And that kind of just became my mindset for literally my entire career from that point on.
Yeah, I actually started my startup and then went into UX design. Similar thing of just like learn everything, get a few jobs and sort of creep in. But I think it is a huge shame that culturally we still place so much emphasis on qualification, particularly where the qualifications are, I mean, it's a whole side topic, but you're like universities are just letting people down unless you're doing a very hard skill like computer science, right? Or doing 5 years of medicine makes sense if you're going to be a doctor.
Right. That's one thing where maybe the qualifications are good.
Like, please do get a qualification. But for everything else, firstly, it's changing so quickly. So if you went and studied user experience design at university, it's completely outdated by the time you actually go around and study it. And secondly, you can just learn everything as you go, right? Learn on the job. As you found, I think so many people are held back by this. I'm sure many people like yourself have dipped their toe into whether it's blogging or app design, whatever it is, and said, well, I'm not qualified, therefore I can't do it.
Right.
And frustratingly, they're probably just that one job away where they get the external validation to go, oh, wow, someone's actually willing to pay me to do this thing.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm now a writer, like I'm a real writer. And it's just, I had a similar thing with UX. I was like, really? They're actually going to give me a job? Like, wow.
You're like, oh, wow, I'm a UX designer? Wow.
Yeah, and then you go into it and it's like, if you're driven, like you're going to freaking not just outwork, but outperform other people because they're not in the office late. They are not reading they're not doing some online course, or for me, it's stuff like reading through the boring Google design documentation.
Yeah.
Most people just aren't doing that. So if you do all of that stuff, you're already probably top 5% of people in your, your junior, mid, senior, whatever
Yeah.
your bracket. And then I think that just getting that external validation definitely helps when
Yeah,
someone's
for
willing to
sure.
hire you. Yeah. Let's talk newsletters. Newsletters sounds really simple, right? So you send emails to people. How do you think about a newsletter? What really is it? And why? You said this is a hill you would die on. Why do you think this is so important?
Yes, it is definitely okay. This is a hill I will die on. And I think the easiest, most straightforward answer is I love newsletters because I think of them as a small business owner, right? We're not talking about, Nike or companies like that right now. It is the most personal conversation that you can have with a customer who you have not physically met yet, if that makes sense. And I think it's totally different than, Instagram or LinkedIn, where it's kind of like more so like personality and short form and things like that. Newsletters are just this guaranteed time with people who have clearly expressed interest in what you do, right? They gave you their email address. Either they are in need of a solution that you're providing, or they signed up because they want a discount, which means they already want to buy what you have. So it's like these people are just so clearly interested in what you're doing. So why would you not talk to them and tell them about who you are and what you stand for and what you have to offer, and a personal experience that you've had that they can definitely relate to because they're probably your ideal customer. Newsletters to me are just the biggest duh of a marketing channel for a small business owner, also because they are so affordable. Newsletter marketing, like you can start a newsletter with $0. Like if you really want to get started with MailChimp, for instance, the only thing it is going to cost you is time. So from my personal experience, like when I first started blogging, I just started sending a newsletter because I quickly realized this was the best way to get people to read my blog. I would send them an email every Sunday saying, "Hey, the new blog post is up. Here's what's in it. Can't wait for you to find out like the surprise ending, whatever it is, just kind of like getting people excited to read it." And this was kind of like my homegrown, like just testing out a business idea without even realizing it, if that made sense. And I just saw that it worked. It so clearly worked. And it gave you the time with people that like,
So when you say it worked, in what sense? When you
it worked in the sense that it would
pre-business?
drive traffic to my blog, right? It would drive traffic to my blog. It would get people engaging. It would get people commenting. And at that point, when I didn't really know what I was going to do in the future, that was like slowly building like a case study of what I was capable of, right? Okay, look, the blog metrics are going up. More people are reading. More people are commenting. Commenting is always great. Engagement is always fantastic. And I started just trialing different things. Okay, what if I tell people to reply to this email? What will they say? And that to this day is still, I mean, it's like a tried and true tactic, right? It's like, I genuinely want people to reply to that email because I want somebody to tell me where they are, what's going on in their life, what's the problem that they're facing. And to this day, it's how I got one of my original 10K email club members. Is like I sent out a newsletter to, my subscriber base and said, reply to this email if like you could relate to this part of the struggle or something like that. She replied, she said, "Wow, I really feel like I'm struggling with this." And I said, "Great, let's chat." And we chatted and I said, "Do you think I can help you? Because I think I can, but up to you." She said, "Yeah. How do I sign up?" And I was like, "Great, let's talk about it." And to me, it's that was no paid ads. That was nothing artificial. That was a genuine conversation I had with a person. It happened with an email newsletter that cost me like 5 cents to send. If you break down the cost of, the tool that I'm using, it's guaranteed time in front of someone. Whereas like a lot of the other small businesses that I work with are very reliant on Instagram. And I mean, I'm sure, I'm not here to, blame the algorithms or things like that. I think social media is actually an incredibly powerful tool for small businesses, but it is also incredibly unreliable. And newsletters are so reliable. So it's a hill I will die on. I think everybody needs a newsletter and everybody needs to routinely be sending a newsletter.
That's the hard part, the routine.
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, I did, well, still going newsletter for Prod MBA, but I think got to about 4,000 people and just flatlined. And we're still getting, 40% open rate. Which is
Amazing.
you go, oh my
Okay.
God, it's nothing. It's still, nearly 2,000 people opening.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to keep to consistently create one when
Is it?
you sort of see that flatline. But no, I think you're right. I think it's how ultimately, I think it's what goal are you driving towards. I think, if you don't just enjoy the process of writing, then specifically writing the newsletter, because I like writing, but I wouldn't say I loved writing the newsletter. Well, let's flip this. How would you suggest, you say, okay, everyone should start a newsletter.
Correct.
How do you actually go about that in a way that you're going to stick with it?
This is something that I am very passionate about because it's actually not that hard. The hardest thing is, especially when you're a small business owner, if it is just you, it's holding yourself accountable. So that I actually, I broke this down a couple weeks ago, actually, I think on Instagram and in my own newsletter. So in my opinion, here's how you can get started. First of all, create a welcome email. Biggest number one thing for anyone listening to this who is hopefully inspired to go and start a newsletter. Pick an email tool, whichever one you want to start using, and just set up a welcome email. All that is like, so then when somebody signs up and says, hey, Henry, I'm really interested in getting your newsletter, they click the button, submit their email address, and you have an automation set up that immediately sends them an email saying, I am so excited you're here. Thank you so much. Here's what you can expect by being a part of my newsletter. Here's a very clear CTA. You should go take action. Check out my website or whatever it is. Follow me on Instagram. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Whatever you want that to be. Have one CTA there. That's number one. That's the easiest thing you can do. And immediately you've kind of got your shit together. Like, yay, woohoo. Then it's setting up what is your routine for a newsletter that you can stick to. I think a lot of people get really ambitious and they say, well, I can send 2 a week. My best advice is in the beginning, send 1 a week. And I know some people listening are like, oh, well, that's too much for me right now. I guarantee you it's not. I guarantee you have time for this. And the best way that I break that down is number one, decide what's going to be your sending day. So for service-based businesses, I recommend anywhere from Tuesday to Thursday. For product-based businesses, if you want to send like a short, sweet, simple, like a newsletter that, highlights products in your Shopify store, Sunday can actually be a really good day because a lot of people are on their phones. Okay, so establish your sending day. Great, you've done that. And then establish what you will internally consider your draft day. I like to say that this is 2 days before you're going to send your newsletter, because what never works is waiting until the last minute. Then you will definitely not be sending a newsletter every week. So what I recommend then is, say, for instance, my personal process. I send on Thursdays. So my draft day is Tuesday. By the end of the day on Tuesday, at all costs, even if after a workout I'm coming back home and, writing this at 10 p.m., my draft is done on Tuesday. Why? Because then Wednesday, that gives me time to, now I'm lucky enough to have someone on my team who does this, but who edits it, puts it into the template. It's nothing fancy. It's something I used to do on my own all the time. That's what Wednesday is for. Wednesday is for putting it into the design, sending myself a test email, making any edits that are needed. Keep in mind, this is not a long process. It's just knowing that like our days are crazy. So at some point on Wednesday, that's going to happen. Test email is going to be sent. I'm going to make any edits. And by Wednesday evening, it will be scheduled for Thursday. That is a process that anybody can follow.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think blocking out, I have a specific time block that's like either Tuesday or Wednesday, but it's 2 days before. Friday is my Sunday. I don't know if that's the right day, but anyway, it's just the day. And I've always found the only way to be consistent. I speak to a lot of people that want to create some sort of content habit. It almost always falls down because of over editing. Like, how do you, let's talk about early on, because it's different. Obviously you have not the luck. You've worked hard to have someone on your team to be able to do that for you. But
right.
How do you think about that? Like, what is the granular process, let's say, for writing, let's say the first newsletter, the regular newsletter? Like, how would you go about that if this is your first time ever doing it?
Sure. I'm trying to think of like how I can not have like a nerdy answer. So like the first thing I would say is, for anyone who's listening to this going, well, I don't even know what to say. For me, then it's probably you haven't established your brand voice, which is something that is not like super technically complicated. Like I have tons of free resources about it. So if you have any questions about this, like feel free to just get in touch with me. But it's really answering the questions of like, what do you have to say? And what are the things, like establishing those types of topics. This honestly goes back to content pillars as well, right? What are, let's say, 3 to 5 topics that you want to be known for talking about? Like, otherwise, it's just really easy to start talking about random things that are not going to drive your business forward. So for me, it's kind of twofold. What's your brand voice? AKA what is the type of language that you're going to be using, right? What is the problem that you're solving? What is the solution that you're giving to people? And also what makes you unique? That's kind of like, I have this like 3-step process that I go through with all my founders to like help you establish your brand voice. It's actually pretty easy. So kind of answering those questions. Then thinking about, okay, what are the topics that I want to be talking about? Because every newsletter does not have to be salesy. This is also something I'm very passionate about, right? The CTA at the end of every newsletter does not need to be, buy my course, sign up for a call, do this. It could be, hey, I was on this podcast with Henry and it was really good fun. Here's what you're going to learn from it. Go listen to it now, right? It could be, wow, I just found out about this really cool brand that's totally aligned with my mission of empowering more female founders. You should go check them out. These are all types of things that you can talk about, right? But so I think it's kind of establishing like, how do you want to talk about things, which would be your brand voice? What kind of things do you want to talk about, which would be your content pillars? And then just sitting down and like, I honestly just have a running Google Doc that, I have the same template in there for every single week. What's my subject line? What's my preview text? What's the body of this email? And what's the CTA? And what's my fun little PS? I love having a fun little PS at the end. And then as I have ideas throughout the week, I'll write them down. Or as I'm planning out my content, for instance, if I'm doing a collaboration with somebody coming up, I find that for me, because I am a creative person, those ideas start to naturally fill in. I have never sat down to write a newsletter and been at a loss for words. But for anybody who is, a few tips would be look at like what's culturally relevant, like what's coming up, right? Are there holidays, for instance, that, you care about or want to talk about? Do you have a launch coming up? Did you get an awesome testimonial from someone? Do people actually know what it's like to work with you? Are there FAQs that you could share with people, right? As you start to grow your business, you will have no shortage of content to write about. You just need to start writing these ideas down, even just like in a note in your phone, so you can come back to them later. But in terms of just getting started, let's say like your very first newsletter, why not share your story? A really smart move, in my opinion, would to be kind of an about newsletter. You could write about, a short story about like, your background and why you started your business, and then save that as a template, because then what you can do is in the future, you can drag that into your beautiful welcome series that you'll eventually start, right? Which will then start to nurture people as they sign up for your list. So I think don't overcomplicate it in the beginning. You can just share your story, and you also don't have to be more serious than you are. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to pretend like you're this giant brand. And I always tell people this, as a small business owner, your biggest superpower is your story. There is a reason people want to work with you as a human instead of a software or AI or something like that that's doing something, for a much lower cost, but way less personal. So I would just authentically show up and start telling people who you are.
I think loads of great advice there. That last one really resonated with me, I think, with Prod MBA. I think also I was 27 when I started Prod MBA and competing against like these like big companies where everyone had worked at Amazon and Google. And I felt for probably just the first year, like, oh my God, I can't tell anyone this is just me. I've got to,
were you talking in like the we? Do? I love when everyone says we.
Yeah, 100%. We were definitely a we.
How many people were on your imaginary we?
A couple of freelancers here and there, but it was very much me, we. And and then I think I just realized no one cares.
Yeah.
No one cares. Like as long as the value is there, as long as you actually, it's a good product. And I think, as you said, and then actually slowly realizing, oh wow, like people are showing up because they want to talk to me, or they
want you
because they want to talk to me. And yeah, I think it took me a while to realize that, but I think, as you say, now I could absolutely lean into it, personal story, that narrative, and sort of build engagement that way. I just want to go back to just sort of recapping that for people, because it's so easy. I mean, it's fear and it's excuses and it's ego protection. Usually are the things. Excuses. Sorry, fear masked by excuses. Right? We go, I can't get started because like I need all this software, or I don't have I need a really good like structure to get started, or I just need to go and get the right note taking app. It's like bullshit.
Oh yeah,
these all excuses. I use Bear for notes. Use whatever the hell you want. Just basic note taking. I use a blank page. Right, Bear again.
I'm a really big fan of the rainbow notepad.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever works. I mean, I've got a remarkable thing this year, but it's a nice to have. But you don't need it.
Yeah.
I think it's so easy to make excuses. I think, as you said, just come up with a couple ideas, note them down somewhere, and then come back to them on your writing day. And as you say, your brain's been sort of working on it somewhere in the background, and you will eventually work out the what your voice is. You have to discover that through doing.
Exactly.
I'm sure, like myself, you have some early blog posts which you look back on going like, what the hell was that?
Oh yeah.
Go to my Medium if you want to see some rubbish writing with no focus. But you have to sort of go through that, right, to learn how to do it properly. You talked about momentum as well. Momentum for a business being important. how does a newsletter sort of tie into that? Because I love the fact you say build a newsletter before you build a business. So tell me about how you think about momentum.
I mean, I could go on and on about momentum all day long. For me, especially as a creative person, I think one of the biggest obstacles for me, I won't lie, when I started my own business was realizing that I had to take ownership of all of the numbers, right? All of the data, all the things like that. It could no longer be, the head of marketing, let's say, telling me, hey, this campaign works, this campaign doesn't, right? I had to know what works, what doesn't, because it's also my money on the line. In a way, I actually think I became really good friends with that kind of, role. And it's something that I now find very empowering, is controlling that part of my business. But on the flip side as well, it's like I also knew early on that, yes, okay, how much money I'm making a month and all that kind of stuff, that's a really nice gauge of how things are going. But I am also incredibly driven by momentum. How do I feel I'm building momentum for myself as a business, right? And that can be any number of things. Like, for instance, am I speaking on a bunch of podcasts? Am I doing collaborations with people who have bigger audiences than mine? Am I talking to clients in an industry that I've never really talked to before? Okay, cool. Am I, for instance, growing my social media following on the channels that matter to me? What are the things that are a bit harder to put numbers on, but that feel like there's stuff happening? Like there are things happening in my ecosystem. One of my favorite testimonials I think I got from an early email club member when she and I first had a chat just to see if she wanted to join. And she said, I just felt like I wanted to be in your ecosystem because there's a lot happening. And for me, that was the best validation of something that I have put so much effort and energy into, right? I think like one of the biggest indicators that I have of measuring my own momentum and my own success in that regard is how many calls do I have with strangers? And not just strangers, right? Not just random people on the internet, but people who are founders, people who are interested in what I'm doing, or people who I'm very interested in what they're doing, right? So this is something where every single month, I try and have a certain number of calls booked onto my calendar with new people, in the sense that I just think it's hard to, like I said, it's really hard to measure and see the ROI on, but things happen when people start to know about you, right? And for the right reasons. You know what I mean? Your ecosystem starts to grow, your reach starts to expand. And this is something where a newsletter, in my opinion, is a very, very easy way to start consistently showing up so that people even know about your ecosystem, right? So that people even know you exist. And then, for instance, when there is actual momentum happening, you can share that with them and they go, look at what Emily's doing. Look at what Henry's doing. Look at who he's talking to. Cool. There's good stuff going on in her world. I want to keep an eye on her, kind of thing. Or like, I want to make sure that I always kind of know what she's doing. And this is something that I feel very passionate about as an entrepreneur, because I think my network and that focus on constantly expanding my network in a very meaningful way, right? Not just here's a business card, let's pretend we're going to have lunch, has led to a lot of clients, a lot of business, and a lot of opportunities for me.
I think it's the best explanation I've ever heard about that. The building momentum. No, honestly, I was thinking, shit, I really should have done this stuff. It's
a lot of stuff I didn't do right. Like, I mean,
yeah.
We need to say that at some point as well.
No, but I think you're just spot on. And the people that I've seen really take off in the sort of product space, they're just freaking proactive. They're everywhere. Yeah. I spoke to Antonia Landi, who actually was one of my first ever customers on Prod MBA. She's just skyrocketed a career, sort of consultant, doing boot camps, all this stuff. Yeah, she's at every conference around the world. But she's everywhere, and that's deliberate. She is deliberately cultivating momentum through exactly the things you're talking about. And this is, I think, a lesson I've learned actually from sort of flatlining. Not flatlining is the wrong one, just flat growth on previous business. And I think it was largely because taking the foot off the pedal is the wrong word, because obviously we don't want to always be like 16 hours a day on a business, but just not being consistently proactive on certain things, and just sort of settling for just doing the newsletter or just doing a webinar now and again. I think it's, as you say, sort of building new connections. And
yeah, I heard this once. I was at like a workshop a couple of weeks ago, and something that really stuck with me was they said, so much of running a business, especially like as an entrepreneur or solopreneur, is playing the short game and the long game at the same time. Mm-hmm. And that resonated so much with me, because I think it is so easy to get stuck in the day-to-day client work, right? Working with people. There's plenty on my schedule that like I am booked for, like, let's say 10 hours a day, just doing the actual work, right? But it is intentionally and consistently setting aside time that you do build that momentum, right? Because it takes effort. It takes effort to make sure that, like, okay, cool. Yes, I know I'm fine today, but how do I want to have better clients in 6 months? Or how do I want to, raise my prices in a year, or whatever it is? And that kind of stuff, it's like, well, then you have to put aside that time for the momentum. And I think this is the struggle that I think almost everyone I know with a business goes through, because you do get to that point where you flatline. Like, I had a point like that as well. I had a point like that last year. And I remember, like, I went to Ramana, the one who helps me with my marketing, and I was kind of like, I feel like I'm tapped out. Like, I feel like I've reached everyone in my network who wants to work with me. They're either working with me or it's not the right time. So what's next? Where do I go from here? And I think then it's almost coming up with new ways of generating that momentum. You know what I mean? So it's definitely, I won't say I've definitely like have all the answers figured out, but it is, I would say I do have that answer figured out. And I think we would both agree there. And it is a really great indicator of how your business is going and looking in the future, and something that is definitely worth making time for, to consistently put in the time and effort to have those calls where there is no, hey, let's work together right now, but it is cultivating that momentum for the future.
Yeah, I think it's that concept of sort of creating more room for luck to happen.
Yeah.
Maybe
I love
1
that.
out of 10 leads to a podcast that leads to something else, or 3 people become clients. I've had this, right? You meet someone 5 years ago, I have a bit of LinkedIn back and forth. 5 years later, they go, "Oh, Henry, I like what you're doing now. Like, here's some money. I'm happy to pay you for whatever you're doing."
That's amazing.
And it is, yeah, it's interesting. It's you see the power of it in some situations like that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about your business at Emily Claire and Co. I find it really interesting.
I'm glad.
Because it'd be bad if I think it's really uninteresting, and I don't know why we're talking. It's on this, because on the surface, right, it's influencer marketing and copywriting, but you've got a very specific angle. I think in terms of value stack, from what I can see, copywriting that delivers results, that's fairly right bread and butter in your industry. But this focus on support and accountability and female founders, I think, is really interesting. How did you? Was it accidental? Was it planned in terms of this sort of unique value proposition that you came up with?
That's a great question. I don't think I was doing anything special at the time. I won't lie. I think when I first started my business, I stuck with what I knew. I had a lot of experience writing for primarily female audiences. I had experience working in the fashion space, in hair care, in beauty, in sustainable fashion. So I had touched a bit in like the sustainability sphere, but at that point in time, it's like I also accepted that like I am not a sustainability expert. That's not something that I really wanted to go into. I had worked in the e-learning space a bit, and randomly in the tech space as well. But I quickly realized that the tech stuff I did not really enjoy writing. Like, it wasn't like my bread and butter copywriting. I wasn't obsessed with it. What did I really enjoy writing? And I found that the more I started to write with, like, for different clients, or the clients that I was immediately attracted to, it was almost always female founders. And I think subconsciously, now it is very conscious, subconsciously at the time, I just found myself attracted to people whose stories I could resonate with, right? And who I genuinely, for me, that my approach to a business was, I just knew I was going to do a better job if I genuinely cared and was rooting for the person behind the company, right? I had 1 or 2 jobs with really, unfortunately, not great bosses, right? Or not great heads of the company. At a certain point, you find it really hard to care. You find it really hard to go above and beyond for people who you just don't agree with the way that they make decisions, right? Or, their morals or their values or things like that. And so I think for me, it just became like, if this is my own business, and if I can choose whatever I want to do, why wouldn't I choose to work with people who I think deserve to succeed in life? I want them to see every ounce of success that I know they're capable of. And a lot of times, like what I was saying before, is I think a lot of times with female founders, it's a confidence issue, right? And this is something that luckily I really bring to the table because of my performance background. I can easily say to you, I'm a very confident person. Like, I mean, I try to be humble sometimes as well, but for the most part, like, I am confident, and I am very confident in how I market myself, how I present myself to the world. I mean, I'm not like a confidence coach or anything like that, but like if you work with me, that confidence will be infused in every word that I write for you, right? Like everything that we do together, I will help you figure out how to confidently put yourself out there. And the more that I worked with small business founders, and of course there are exceptions, 9 times out of 10, it was female founders who needed more confidence with putting themselves out there. I mean, there's a whole host of stats, to back up that. So I think for me, then it just became, I love doing this. I love rooting for people. And I especially wish that more women would get out there and start their businesses and succeed as well. So I'm going to work with female founders. And I think then for me, it was just a very clear choice. And I mean, also in the beginning as well, one of my big clients that I first started working with was Clue, the period tracking app, which is used by millions of people all over the world. It is a very progressive female led company. And for me, it was an eye opener in the sense of it was very personal. It was very intricate, like an incredibly nuanced tone to make sure that everybody feels included, right? We say, words like people with cycles instead of just saying women all the time, becoming familiar with the fact that sometimes when you're talking about pregnancy, for some people, it's not always a positive thing. Like it became such an eye opener for me in writing for women is so incredibly complex. And I think not enough people give it the attention that it deserves. And I can do that, right? I have the skill set to help you communicate your superpowers with the right language, the right vocabulary, and you can feel awesome about it. So I'm going to stay in my lane. Like I just kind of then just totally own that lane, and have henceforth like just been very, very proudly marketing myself to female founders. I have worked with some awesome male small business owners as well. Like I will say that. And they've been awesome guys to work with as well. So it's not like, there's an application form and you check the box. And if you're a female founder, you get in. But for the most part, I just found that I have the most impact with female founders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's just some really key points for people thinking of starting a business there around niche selection. Like, how do you select the right audience? I think first one is something I always like bang on about to people is the cuteness of the niche. Can you find, so say you're like, okay, I could help anyone with copywriting. If you try and go really specific, so level down would be, okay, well, what about founders who need help with copywriting because they don't have time? Yeah, great, that makes sense. But female founders makes even more sense because they particularly suffer from a lack of confidence. Therefore, The problem is very acute for them. Therefore, they're more likely to pay. They're more likely to put work in. Right? They're just going to be better customers for you. And the second one I also try to think about personally a lot is, are you going to like working with this niche? Because there are loads of businesses you could build that, if you want to make money, you can make money somewhere. Like go work with tobacco companies or companies. And, that's fine if that's your thing or whatever. But you need to get up and enjoy, if you look at your calendar on Monday and go, I've got 20 calls with people that I hate or just completely morally disagree with, you're not going to enjoy that business and therefore not going to enjoy your life. I think just choosing someone that you go, I want to actually root for them and really be on their side. I think it's super important because again, business is a long game.
Yeah.
I think not only, I think people think it's like, okay, you're going to do it for like 2 years and sell or maybe 5. But almost always you see people building upon previous businesses. So when you're choosing an audience, you're probably going to stick in that lane for, if not the rest of your career. And then the third thing is like, what am I uniquely good at? And you were quite clear about filtering through these 3 lenses, which has obviously worked out really well. I want to talk about brand as well. I really like the way, I think brand is one of these, it's a buzzword, right? It's very hard to do well, but when it's done well, it's very effective. I love how you describe it on your website. Quote, Emily Claire & Co. is everything that I, Emily, aspire to be. It's creative, it's witty, and it's filled with powerful communication ready to help you, your brand, and your customers stare at your business with the same awe as 16-year-old Emily stepping foot on a Broadway stage for the first time. Tell me about that statement.
Wow.
A lot in there.
I wrote that like 2 years ago, and hearing it out loud, I was like, I really like that.
Why did you write it?
I wrote it, I think, twofold. One, I want people to know what I stand for. I think to me, it is very important. If I think about, it literally going back to the point that we were just making, I like to work with people that I'm genuinely rooting for, right? And typically I find that then it's people who like my personality as well, right? Like my story, my experience, things like that. I love having a relationship with clients where, It's like happening now with a few of the women that I'm working with in my 10K email club. One just had an amazing workshop yesterday. And immediately after it's done, she's sending me messages on Instagram. Oh my God, Emily, the workshop was amazing, this and that. I'm like, yes, tell me more about it. Amazing. Like this is not just transactional. You know what I mean? For me, like when I work with people, it is a journey is a really cliche word. So I'm not going to say a journey, but it's really a relationship that spans beyond Google Docs. You know what I mean? And so for me, it's really, I want people to know what I stand for, the types of words that I use, right? That is a very long sentence with lots of, over the top words, but that's who I am. Can I write really short, sweet, snappy marketing copy for push notifications? Absolutely, no problem. But I want people to know that, I don't know, now I need to look back at like the description, but I think for me, it's incorporating, right? Like I'm very now proud of that performance history that I have. I think for me as well, the element of brand here is something that I am very passionate about and have been very careful about since day one as well. This is something where I think if I had to guess, some people listening to this podcast will definitely disagree with me on this one, but I put the extra time, resources, money into making sure that everything I did looks professional. And I want people to know, and I think that sentence in a way gets that across as well, is that I don't put anything half baked out there, right? Like if we put something out there, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be perfect. And you're going to sit there and you're going to look at your website copy and go, damn, that's amazing. You know what I mean? Which is that whole, like, it's that whole sense of sitting in that audience, staring at a Broadway stage. I will never forget the first time I saw a Broadway show and just like having my eyes be open to the next level of something that I never even knew existed. And that's something that I want to help people tap into with their business. And a lot of times when you're doing everything yourself, you're building your website yourself, you're doing your copy yourself, it's hard to get it to a level that looks really professional. So by working with me, at least copy wise, and then this is where, this is why I actually started the 10K email club, is because it goes beyond just copy, right? It's every element of your business. Like you're going to want to start to show up and look professional. So it's something that I'm really passionate about. And I think that's kind of why I wrote that, is so people know that when we start working together, this is not just here's the invoice, thanks so much, have a great day. This is you and I deciding that we're going to get your business to a certain level and we're going to do that together.
Yeah, I think it's so particularly important in your industry. If you're selling good copy, you can't have spelling mistakes. It has to look clean. It has to be presented clearly.
Yeah,
I think it makes a lot of sense there. Let's talk about the 10K email club. I think it's a really interesting subject. So when I looked at, initially I go, okay, she does copywriting, influencer marketing, and then the person that introduced us, quote, said, 10K email club is the best $200 per month I've ever spent. 10K email club on the surface it's an email club, right? It's a sort of newsletter, sort of community. Seems like a lot of money, $279 per month for this. On the surface, I think, as you say, it's not. It's probably undervalued. How did you think about positioning this as more than just a newsletter? How did you sort of break out and create sort of a new category here with this product?
So, yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this. So I started the 10K email club because I was working with bigger clients, right? I was just working with big clients and I noticed that my schedule was really filled with big clients. And I'm sure anyone else who's listening to this can probably agree. B2B work is where it takes much longer to get the clients, but once you get the clients, the paychecks are much higher, right? So B2B is like, cool, check, I had done that. I understood that I could write for bigger clients and I could make more money. But why would people want to work with uniquely me, right? And how could I make sure that I was really tapping into this network of female founders that I know I loved? What I just started to see is I was honestly just kind of testing the waters. And this is twofold. For anyone listening to this as well who does want to start their own business, it is only a matter of time before you realize you need a scalable offer. And at this point, I had nothing that I could scale. I had nothing where I could get 20 people on one call instead of just doing 20 one-on-one calls, right? Like think about the logistics of that. One is clearly a better use of your time. And so for me, I was trying to figure out what was my scalable offer. I thought about launching, some much higher tier offers for, what if I just did emails for small business owners? But if I want to do weekly emails for a small business owner and then send them and everything like that, it was going to be over $1,000 a month, right? And what small business owner has an extra $1,000 a month that they're willing to toss to a copywriter? They don't actually know that well. So for me, it was like that idea became kind of half baked. And I thought, no, I don't think so. So I started to just kind of sign up for the newsletters of other female founded businesses that I encountered, right? What are people sending? What's going on? And I noticed just so many glaring problems. One, a lot of times you would sign up and you wouldn't even get a confirmation that you were on the list. Two, you would get an email once in a blue moon, like so inconsistent. And I think the problem with that is, I mean, don't get me wrong, I encourage anyone to send an email. But if you get an email from somebody once every 11 months, the chances of them unsubscribing are much, much higher because they're like, who is this person? When did I sign up for that? Like, bye. So I just started to see some really clear problems. And I also started to see that, like a lot of these small business owners as well, I gave them so much credit because they were sending the emails, but they weren't convincing. They weren't confident. They had no marketing twist whatsoever. And it was just this almost like avalanche of superfluous words that kind of led to nowhere. And I just sat there going, oh, this could be so much better. Like, this could be so much better. So what could I do? And so I then kind of started to lay out the framework. And I will say I am an ideas person. And this one, I won't lie, like an idea literally just came to me one day and I started to write it down. I was like, an email club where when people join, the one thing I have to offer that is a unique a unique value proposition is I am a professional copywriter and I am really good at editing other people's copy as well. This is something that I've seen. So what can I do? I won't write emails for them because that takes too much time and that's something that I can't really scale. But they can write a weekly marketing email that I will hold them accountable for and I will edit it. I will make it better. I can do that. Like I can 1,000% take somebody who, for instance, is launching a course and decide. I had this actually with someone who decided to share the launch at like the PS of a personal newsletter. And I was like, we're doing a 4 email launch series about how amazing your course is. We're not sharing a personal story and saying, hey, PS, this thing I put 10 months of work into is now available for sale. Like, absolutely not. So that was number one. Number one, I laid out, okay, the very clear thing that I have that's going to set me apart from other people is that I will actually put my hands on everyone's marketing email and I will make them better. That is very valuable because I don't know a single copywriter in the world that would take a contract right now for less than $300 a month, right? For a weekly email as well, not just one. So that immediately I knew I could provide value with. Second, I knew that this idea of accountability was really lacking for so many other founders in the space, including myself. This is why in the very beginning, when I first started my business, I wasn't consistently sending weekly newsletters. I was kind of doing every other week, sometimes once a month. And then eventually I really committed to it and I went all in because I established like that schedule that we were just talking about. And I just realized that for me, whenever I've joined other groups, as soon as you pay money for something, you take it more seriously. So I knew that if people were to join this group and we were to establish, and we do this in every onboarding call, what is your sending day and what is your draft day? If you don't have your draft to me by Tuesday, I'm not going to have time to edit it on Wednesday, right? So it's like getting into this idea of what is your draft day? What is your send day? Great. Send me the test email. Let's make sure it looks great, right? Establishing that idea of accountability. Another factor there, I think like the third thing as well that I started to see was really valuable is this idea of community. How can I create a space so that people feel invested in each other's success? Not just a connection on Instagram, not just, a follow or a like or, a connection on LinkedIn, for instance, but people who are genuinely invested in each other's success. We can show up and talk to each other once a week. That's what we can do. And everyone can read each other on, right? So that was something that I set up. And then I introduced all sorts of challenges and things like that to really foster this idea of community. And then the last one as well was just making sure that people would stay. How could I make sure that people would want to stay in this? Oh, well, I could bring in guest experts so that there's constantly new value being added, right? So for instance, what I now do is ask people in the club. And in the beginning, it was like a fraction of what it is now. In the beginning, I had a couple people, we were figuring it out as we went. Every Wednesday, they got a workshop just with me. Or I think in the beginning, it was even only like 2 workshops a month or something because it wasn't enough people that it was worth it. Now we do weekly Wednesday workshops. And for instance, I have a couple founders in the club now who are really interested in testing out Pinterest. Pinterest can be a great marketing channel for ads, especially as well. It's not very expensive. I'm not a Pinterest expert, but I found an awesome person who is. So she's coming in next Wednesday to do a Pinterest workshop. How can I just keep getting value for people so that they understand that this is, for instance, as Atlas said, the best $200 they've ever spent? Because whatever they need, as long as I can provide it or find it, I will give it to them. And if I can't, and if it's out of scope, that's fine. I'll put them in touch with whoever needs, to know them or know about them. Going back to the very beginning of this call, when we were saying, I do think when people work with me, it's not just a transactional thing, right? This could become my downfall as the club continues to scale and grow. But I want people to know that I'm genuinely invested in their success, right? And when they join this club, it's like, here's what I'm going to give you. This is a 2-way street. You need to give this back to me, and then we'll be unstoppable.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's really interesting you talking about it, but just that asking that question as well of how do I now scale? Okay, right, I've maxed out my time with clients. How do I now scale my own time once I reach that point? I think it's, and then just the way you think about stacking value and packaging it, bundling, we'd call it, bundling it, putting it in this new package and saying, rather than saying it's a workshop and it's a newsletter and I'm your personal copywriter, it's this package new thing, 10K email club. I think it's a very, very good example of productizing like a service or freelance or consulting offer. I think we could go on for another hour or so, but I think we also should move towards a conclusion. I've got a couple of quick fire questions to wrap up. What one piece of advice would you give an aspiring entrepreneur to get started?
Launch before you're ready.
I'm writing this down.
Should I expand?
You could, but I think it's self-explanatory. I think you're spot on. The challenge is actually doing it, but
so just stop making excuses. Just do it.
Mm-hmm. I think you're always going to feel uncomfortable launching. So there's no point when you go, great, this is definitely the right thing to do. It's definitely going to work.
And I also think the longer you wait, to be honest, the scarier it becomes. So it's better just to put it out there, or at least tell people about it. And then, then you can't go back.
Completely agree. Second question. What one piece of advice would you give someone who's maybe scared of getting that first sale? So they've got an idea, they may have a newsletter, they're scared of pitching their first paid offer or asking someone for money on a sales call.
Based on my own process, I would say line up plan B, C, and D. So A is not so scary. I think plan A always becomes so scary when you have all your eggs in one basket, right? What if you show up on that call and that person is a nightmare of a human being and you don't want to work with them? Lower the stakes for both of you by kind of lining up other calls and other this and other that. I think, and then focus on one at a time for sure. I'm a really big fan of goal setting. When I first started my business, my first goal was just to get one big client, and I gave myself 3 weeks to do it. And I did it. But then it was great, now I got them, I can move on to the next one. It wasn't just great, I've got this one client, now I'm going to sit here and chill. It was to keep growing. So I think to make everything less scary, just don't put all of your eggs in that one basket, especially as a freelancer or a solopreneur. Sow your seeds everywhere so that the first plan does not become life or death.
Yeah, great advice. I've loved this conversation. I'm quiet because I'm sort of thinking of lots of different notes I've taken for my own entrepreneurial journey. Where should people find you, Emily?
Sure. So people can find me on my website, which is emilyclaireand.co. I'm very active on Instagram as well with my business. It's Emily in Hamburg. And on my website as well, you'll see my email address, but it's emily@emilyclaireand.co as well.
Awesome. I will definitely link those in the episode.
Thank you so much.
Emily, it was awesome. Thank you for listening to another episode of Brief Founders. If you enjoyed this episode and want to get each shiny new episode straight to whatever platform you use to listen to your podcast, please subscribe using the subscribe button below. If you're feeling generous, why not share with a friend?